side stuff.
Yes, that's right.
Nice job. That sounded great, man.
Really nice to meet you, Brian, in person. How are you doing?
I don't mind being slightly in the dark, just so people can't see my haggard E3 face, right?
I didn't go to any E3 parties this year, so it made it a lot more mellow.
Yeah, we haven't been to any, but that's just exhaustion, basically.
Well, I think it's a good call. How many E3s have you gone to?
None.
None, okay.
Yeah.
So this, I think, is my 20th. I've been to every single one. So back when they started, there weren't really any parties. But then I think when Sony's PlayStation took off, they started having big parties, and that was the thing. You probably heard about that. I mean, they were huge parties with big performers, and then it just fell off a cliff. And now nobody does it anymore, which is kind of a good thing. I'm really glad.
But at the time, I'm sure it was fun.
It was a blast because I feel I'm betraying my age. We were all I was in my late 20s probably when that was all going on, and it was awesome to go see bands like the Foo Fighters in Atlanta.
Yeah.
I remember that distinctly, and I would never be able to get up next to the stage in a Foo Fighters concert, but Sony had them at their party, or Everclear, or something like that. It just was insane. Lots of money. And then things changed.
But they still spend an awful lot of money on that conference.
Well, that's great.
Microsoft did, right? That was huge.
Yes, they did. Well, they're putting it where game players can see it, and where people who
just party for you, right?
Well, a lot of the times it certainly wasn't necessarily for all of us. It was for everybody, just peripherally involved in the industry, and it was having a ticket to the party was like having money, really, because getting in was challenging.
I guess it was just a show of force, as in almost showing off, basically.
What's pretty cool though too is the industry has spread out so much, and with mobile, and with PC just making a huge resurgence. It's not about one company or two companies. It's about just games everywhere, which is really cool.
So you guys showing playable on the show floor?
Yeah, we were showing 8-player co-op, just part of our cooperative mode.
Yeah.
And but I was dying to see what you guys were doing. I mean, I saw the press conference and your video, and one thing that struck me, it reminded me of old Apple II games that I played, where I think the Sundog was one of them, where you would land a ship on a planet and you would go just explore. It was procedural, but it was just pixels.
Yeah.
And I was also so excited to find a pixel, like a black pixel in a white field. That was the best feeling. And you've, of course.
But I grew up with those kind of games, and actually that's not true. When I would say between the ages of 5 and maybe 9, and I was playing things on Amstrad and Commodore 64 or Amiga or something like that, you tended to have way more freeform games.
Yeah.
You would tend to, I don't know if this was just me, but you would boot up a game and you wouldn't even have the manual for it, or they wouldn't have told you anything, and you would just run your fingers across the keyboard and just see if anything happened, and you'd be like, right, that key does something.
Yeah.
And you just figure out the whole game yourself. And that players are not treated with that level of intelligence at all now.
But I think it's coming back. I mean, I think your game seems like a great example of it, and another great example is FTL. It's a game that I play a lot, and it does not hold your hand.
Yeah.
And that's what it's that same feel. Right. Treat players like they're actually intelligent, savvy folks, and part of the game is figuring it out.
But it's not. A lot of that stuff isn't that hard to figure out, if you know what I mean. But you feel clever for doing it.
But you and I have been playing games for a long time, right? So, and we're also developers, so we have a pretty good idea of what the basic mechanics should be. But you're right. I agree.
But you drop someone in with Gears of War who's never played a game before. Even after the tutorial, they'll still be lost, right? Just in terms of dual stick controls and things like that.
Yeah,
but for all the rest of us, we'll find the tutorial incredibly boring. You know what I mean? So you kind of think who's it for, right? As in, I think we go through a similar process game to game, just because we're supposed to now, you know what I mean? And generally, like, because I've worked on some of those games, you want players to like pretty much hardly ever die, right? That seems to be the way games are now. Like I remember playing, you know, like one of the Call of Duties, and I was like 2/3 of the way through, and then suddenly died, and thought, oh, I hadn't seen that before, you know.
I gotta say, I think the pendulum's swinging back though. I definitely feel like we're seeing a lot of demand for hard games.
Yeah.
Games that will sometimes punish you.
Yeah, like Dark Souls.
Like
right?
Dark Souls, good
and
example.
everyone goes crazy for that
Yeah.
right now because it's super. It is difficult, but it's really well designed.
Right.
And it's quite freeform, and you don't have a huge amount of choice, but you have a bit of choice, and that it's not that much, but like you personally, I react really well to it. It's like you're like, oh my god, I'd forgotten that you could just have that. You know?
Well, and I think that's the game being fair, right? It's a big difference between a game that punishes you, but you feel good about it because you understand the rules, you understand why you failed, and a game that just either changes the rules on you or just is so obtuse that you just don't, or opaque that you don't know why you continue to fail, and it feels like something's broken.
Yeah.
And that. But it was cool is that I think in our industry, design continues to mature, and we continue to learn new lessons for these new genres, or these lessons are becoming more prevalent across the industry. Like we all kind of get it a little bit better.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. But probably most of what was shown at like the conferences was more of the pendulum being the other way, right? Like as in was pretty traditional generally. You know what I mean? Like, and reasonably, will probably be reasonably predictable in that it was like lots of sequels and stuff like that.
True.
Like, you know.
I think more about the games that are pushing boundaries. Like, I mean, at Microsoft's conference, they had the giant cavalcade of indie games, right? And I guarantee a lot of those games are going to surprise people in terms of the game mechanics and the difficulty, and even the look and feel. So that's what I think about, and those are the games that get me excited, and I get a lot of hardcore players excited because they're experimenting still.
I was excited by the two kind of bigger indie games that they showed us, and that they gave quite a bit of time to. But like I have this thing we always talk about it is like the dreaded indie montage.
I'm sorry. Yeah, you know what? I apologize because both of us are independent. We both represent independent companies, and saying that about other games is a little bit weird.
Yeah. Like, but it's like that. The indie montage is like, my experience of that is always somebody will say, "Hey, we've got you, this awesome opportunity. You're going to be on the like E3 or GDC or whatever, right?" And you get super excited about it, and you make this whole like 5-minute demo for it, and then you go and like switch it on, and you're like, got the whole team round, let's watch. And your game has always been cut down to like the dreaded indie montage where they go, and we've got a load of exciting indie games, and it's just like bam, 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 and your 5-minute demo is just like, for us, Joe Danger just going past like, oh, I think that was him, so a frame of him, right? And it's kind of like, it's fine, and I understand why that happens, and basically there's this huge variety of indie games, and it's really hard to represent and all of that kind of stuff, but it's like also sort of it can be a little bit dismissive as a term, if you know what I mean. It can be like this bucket that you put everything in, you know what I mean, like everything that is non-retail or non-traditional or whatever, and it's like, put them all in the indie bucket, and I've been in that indie bucket for years, like Hello Games has or whatever, and it's kind of awkward because you want to break out of it, or you want to associate yourself with like, actually you're much closer to other indie games, or non-indie games, like we always saw ourselves as very similar to, say, we would compare ourselves to like some Nintendo games and stuff like that, but people would be trying to compare us to like Limbo and Braid, and that doesn't make sense or whatever, we don't fit very well in that indie bucket.
Sure, you know what, to me though, indie still, the moniker indie still means different. Then that's what I love about just being an independent developer, and B, the democratization of development. The fact that all of us, regardless of the size of our company, regardless of our age, can make games. I mean, that was not the case 25 years ago.
Because some people say they're like independent developers and some people say they're indies. You know what I mean? And I don't know which one we are, right? But would you say that you're an indie studio?
I don't think we are considered an indie studio because we've been around for a long time and we've got big partners.
But you would think that you have the spirit of it? Or?
Hell yeah. I mean, we've all at Insomniac been waving the independent flag for a hell of a long time, and proudly, because we believe in controlling our destiny. And yes, we have big partners who kick ass on promoting our games and give us a lot of support, but ultimately, all the games are created at Insomniac. Those ideas come from Insomniac, and we're proud of them and we take ownership of them.
But lots of smaller games have those big partners now anyway. You know
Which is
what
cool.
I mean? So that doesn't define whether you're indie or not, I think it, you know, it means two things. It's like whether you're in business independent and also whether you have some sort of spirit, you know what I mean, of kind of indiness. And I don't know how to define that, but like, I know what you mean. I can see how you can.
It's a good question to ask, and because I think any studio can ask. I mean, whether you're part of a larger corporation or you are two people in a bedroom, if everybody on your team feels like they have ownership in what they're creating, I think that's the indie spirit right there, because you're controlling what it is that you're doing from day to day, and you're molding that thing together. And that's what's, I mean, for me at least, that's what's really, really fun about development, regardless of the surroundings. Having surroundings where you can realize those dreams is, whether it's the financial support or the publishing network or platforms that you can publish on, those are all really important. But having the people on your team who are saying yes.
Yeah. So, but how big is Insomniac?
We are over 200 people. We have a couple offices, but you know, it's taken us a long time to get to those numbers. And
it's presumably hard for everyone to have that ownership when they're.
No, it isn't actually, because we have multiple projects going on at a time, and everybody on our teams is involved in making what we do, making the games. And we're constantly asking, hey, what do you want to do? Sunset Overdrive is a great example of that. This is a game that is a result of people just bringing in crazy influences from everywhere and just sticking them together in a big ball.
Yeah.
There is always a kernel of an idea. Somebody comes up with that first idea and says, you know, wouldn't it be cool if, but it doesn't work if we have people pulling the other way. And I've been in that situation where I've been the one saying, hey, this is a game we should do. We made a game, the predecessor to Ratchet, where I was really pushing an idea hard, and everybody was saying, no, that doesn't sound very good. And I was saying, yes, this is great. People were saying, no, I don't really like this. And it crashed and burned horribly because I hadn't figured that out. So
yeah, I know it's interesting because like I've come from like a more AAA background or whatever, and kind of worked at like Criterion, and then that became EA, and you know it was 100-man teams or whatever, and you know I had a reasonably senior role where I felt like I did have ownership, but at the same time it's still, for me, nothing like the ownership that we have now. You know, in a 4-man team or a 10-man team or whatever, just by its nature. You know what I mean? Like if you are the guy who's just the animator, right, or an animator on one character, it's just really hard to have that ownership. You know what I mean? Like you can influence the game, but it's just by its nature, it's difficult to have that full feeling. I would guess of.
I think it just depends on the culture you create.
Yeah.
You know, it's up to if you are running a company, or if you have influence in your company, and you decide that you want a culture that demands creative input from everybody, you can create it. That's the way I feel. Now, I never worked at EA, so I have no idea what that's like. Or and Insomniac has never been part of a larger organization. We've just grown organically. So I'm really only talking about our experiences.
Yeah. No, Criterion was like real big before it was bought by EA, but I think it's, and I think it was a great place to work, you know. But it's just, you do see an awful lot of people now, like this kind of, it's almost like asteroids, you know, where you shoot an asteroid and they all splinter off or whatever. It's just like more and more you see AAA studios losing people, not to other AAA studios, but to them just starting up on their own or whatever. It's like this real, you know, like Criterion is a great culture, but you generally tend to hear that thing of like, I got into games to be a small group of guys, you know, where that's what you that's certainly for me what I always pictured when I pictured development. I was always, that's what Criterion was when I started, but when it's 100 people, it's just really hard to have the same, you can't listen to 100 voices all saying something different at once, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think the challenge is absolutely agree, right? And I think that's where, if all the voices are saying something different, then there's something wrong with the project. And that's where having that initial vision and that curator of the vision, it really helps a lot, where you can have that one person who's saying, hey, guys, here it is generally, help me.
Did Sunset Overdrive start small?
Yes, all of our projects start with a relatively small pre-production team, but the difference is we broadcast the initial project to the entire company. We ask everybody to just give their ideas. And Sunset Overdrive began with two guys, our co-creative directors, Marcus and Drew, saying, we have this idea for the game. And then they presented it to some of us, and then a lot of us, and then the whole company, and they just started getting bombarded with ideas. But the cool thing was, their initial vision was so strong that the ideas were generally moving on this eight-lane highway towards them versus on a bunch of tributaries that had nothing to do with the game. That's a terrible analogy, sorry. I just used a boat analogy and a car analogy, and I don't think there are 8-lane highways, but you know, something like that. So I have a question for you about No Man's Sky. When I heard you talking earlier, and when I watched the video, I got the impression that this is a game where you can pretty much do anything. The promise is that you can do anything, which sounds unbelievably technically brutally hard. And how have you avoided the no, meaning the N-O,
right?
Where people say, no, can't do it.
No, is you know, we haven't avoided it, and we definitely have said no to an awful lot, and we're trying to actually, you know, build something that is reasonably not straightforward or simple, but you know, not out of control either, right? What we're doing in terms of generating a universe and stuff like that, that's a technical problem, right?
Okay.
And one that we think that we're solving pretty well now. But in terms of gameplay, you have a whole bunch of different options. But it is a sandbox, right?
Sure.
So in terms of, you know, the example that people would use, I guess, would be something like Minecraft, right? In Minecraft, you can kind of do anything, right? But at the same time, it's a reasonably simple game, you know, and I can code up a Minecraft clone in a few weeks, right? But, you know, as so many people do, because it's simple rules that you're being let loose with, right?
So you've established a very, very clear set of rules, and you're working within those rules, and that's how you've avoided the no.
Yeah, but we haven't avoided the no. You know, like, there's loads of things that we don't do, and that, well, you know, the problem is the game is so kind of, like, the content is vast, and so people think, oh, will you be able to build or play multiplayer with all your friends or whatever, you know, because it just inspires those questions, and there's no bar, you know. Normally there's a bar, so if you say you're making a racing game, you don't expect to be able to get out of those cars and, you know, jump in a plane or whatever, but people with our game sort of think, well, you've taken down other boundaries, so let's have those boundaries gone. So we do kind of keep a damper on it, you know, and it is within control, but I'd like to be making the game for quite a while. So even after it comes out, I would still like to add more to it, and more features and more updates, and that's that kind of new way of making games. And I think our game is open to that. It inspires that, I guess.
Well, which is awesome. Seriously. Well, let's go back to when you are talking about just the idea itself.
Right.
And this is because this is something that I would imagine every developer runs into. We certainly do. When someone in your team says, no way.
Right.
Do you ever run into that?
You mean no way in terms of
that's
no
crazy.
Way I don't want to do it.
That's what I'm talking about. Like when you say, you know what we got to do? Let's build this infinite universe where we're going to procedurally generate planets, and you can go out and name them yourself, and you know what? You're going to be 75 million miles away from your neighbor, but it's going to be awesome. And one of your team member goes, No, you're nuts. Can't do that. Can't do it.
So we have a weird way of working, and I think it's kind of based around our personalities.
Okay.
So actually, Hello Games, after Joe Danger, grew to about 10 people, right? And we had a slightly nicer studio that was slightly bigger. We'd been in this tiny room for like a year and a half before that. And we made Joe Danger 1, and then that had done well, so we had kind of grown a little bit and become a little bit more proper as a company, right? And then we made like more. We made Joe Danger 2 and 2 more games on mobile and stuff. But what was within us, I think, was, and in particular within me, was like craving the small startup. Even though 10 people isn't big, right? I still just crave that prototype phase, that crazily kind of boundless energy and you against the world and all of that kind of thing. So we actually got a smaller room within the office, like really small, just enough for 4 of us, because I think that works real well for us. And 4 of us is slightly different to what I found at the company. Went in that room and we actually locked the door and we had our own separate entrance.
Really?
And we didn't show anyone else what we were working on for an entire year, right?
Damn.
And we...
Really? And you
Yeah.
guys are all part of the same company, and
Yeah.
nobody knows what's going on in that room other than the 4 people in it,
Yeah.
who have a separate entrance into the office.
Yeah.
That must have been hard to maintain.
Yeah, and it built an enormous amount of pressure and almost guilt,
Yeah.
And it went back to what I'd felt when we very first started Hello Games, because I felt that with all of my friends.
Yeah.
Like they would ask me what I was working on, and I was like, it's not ready to show, and suddenly they're almost like the publisher, right? They are the overseers of the content or whatever, and you want to impress them, and they represent the greater public, right? So you're almost basing milestones around that. And that's kind of how we worked. And it wasn't that we intended to go in for a year, we intended to go in for like 3 months and then 6 months and then 9 months. And it worked to plan, but we were always like, it's not ready, it's not ready, it's not ready. And it wasn't until like the VGXs, which is when we first showed it, that we kind of opened the doors a couple of weeks beforehand and said, okay, here's what we've been doing, and like that's the total opposite of what you were talking about. And
Yeah, it really is.
I know it sounds terrible, right?
Right, look, if it works, it works. That's
Well, who knows, right? But the idea is to create like kind of like nuclear fission, right? Just cram these people together, have them so bought into the idea that they almost don't even have to ask each other's questions or have any kind of, we've discussed it to the point, and we're so close together and working pretty much in tandem, like, in complete sync, that we can work at our full capacity, like at 100 miles an hour, basically, for me in terms of like programming, and the others in terms of art and programming. There is no designer or anything like that, and we're just like full steam ahead, right? And I like to think to myself, this is the most productive I've ever been in my life, right? That there is absolutely no distractions, no discussions or whatever. This is what I'm doing, and the other person is working exactly to plan or whatever, and we have the analogy of we're driving like at 100 miles an hour, right? And just shouting at each other as we go. And hoping to cross the like finish line together, to use some crappy analogy. But the idea there, the like, is to avoid the no way. It's already been set down, and our game is super ambitious, but that is kind of born of what I would call of almost like my midlife crisis, and our midlife crisis in terms of video games development. Like actually, I don't know, we'd made Joe Danger, and I thought I could move on to something that's of a similar size and scale, and that will be another few years of my life, and then what will I do after that, and what will I do after that? And do I even want to make games all my life? You hardly ever see an older games programmer, right? And so you think, how many games am I going to make in my whole life? I don't know if you've ever had that thought, like how you've probably made more than most, right? Already, because you guys have been really productive. But you think how many will I ever make, and will any of them be like, I guess not great, but like stand out and remembered or whatever, or just be worth something, right? In like 10 years time when people look back. And so we were like, let's just blaze a trail, and actually the discussion we had was Joe Danger has afforded us this like luxury, right? We have enough money to just go crazy or whatever for a little while, just on our own as four of us. So if we're going to do that, let's just actually properly go crazy. Let's not come out of this room saying, we've made this like platforming game and it's, it's a physics puzzler or whatever, and have something that had been done before. I don't want to sit there and be loading up other games and kind of copying from them or whatever, you know what I mean? And talking about, well, this does that well, so I'll do that, I don't want to be trying to copy and paste code and ideas. Just wanted to do something totally different. And we've made like the biggest mess and mistake, because that game's now gone down well and people have hype about it and stuff, and we now need to deliver on it. But I guess in a good way, right? And it's really exciting. It's having the reaction. We kind of thought it will either have this massive reaction and people will love it, or we will be like bankrupt and destitute and we'll never make a game again, kind of thing. And we were happy with like both outcomes. Like
Sure.
Genuinely, we made our peace with that, and we're just like, let's go crazy. What's the game you've always wanted to make your whole life? And that's what we talked about.
That's inspiring.
So, or stupid,
really
we'll see how it turns
really
out.
great. I hope people listening to this can get inspired by that and say, no, because that's what you're saying is at least what I hear you saying is you believe truly that you can do anything, and you can. No, I'm saying this in a good way.
Yeah.
We all should believe that, right? And with the right focus and with the right belief in our abilities by ourselves or with a small group of people, you can achieve it. I mean, because what you guys are talking about is unbelievably ambitious, right? And what you're showing is unbelievably ambitious. But pulling it off, it sounds like you pulled it up, well, because you got to the point you are right now because you guys believed in it. And that's kind of what I was saying earlier. If you have people who believe in the project, it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter how ambitious it is. You're gonna do it because you believe in it. Well, which I think is, I mean, that's just not games. That's everything.
Yeah, I think you've got to take it in context. So I'd come from Criterion where I'd made like so many Burnout games, right? Like year on year and PSP versions and everything all at once, right? And so you're just constantly shipping that game, and then I had gone, I'm going to break away and do my own thing. And suddenly I'm like 3 years in and I've made 4 Joe Danger games,
Which, by the way, are really fun. I hope, I mean, it's funny you say that. I understand, because we all have this urge to make new stuff, right? We want to move, grow, move beyond what we've done in the past. But Joe Danger really is just personally, it's provided a lot of laughs in my household. Every time we see one of the motorcycle riders die, it's a laugh fest. It's awesome. And it's just little things like that create this lasting charm for Joe Danger, for any franchise. And it's just this perfect little touches.
But that means, like, genuinely means a lot coming from you. Like, that style of game is something that we aspire to, and something that you guys do incredibly well, right?
But I think we all struggle to find those little things, like that one or two things that players grab and remember, that create those nostalgic moments, like we've had playing games in our childhood, and we look back on, and I remember picking up the key with in Adventure, right? Picking up a key or picking up a sword and slaying the dragon that looked like a duck, right? I remember that vividly. I remember the first time I played Doom, right? Just flashes of that game stick out a hell of a lot more brightly in my mind than some of the more recent games I played, because those games had little polished moments.
Their personality, though, I always felt playing Doom and Quake that I knew what the id team were like, that I knew what John Carmack would look like, and he looked exactly how I pictured he would look like, or that Romero would look the way and they would be into the type of music that I was into at the time and stuff like that. You just kind of knew that, and I think personality dripped from those games.
Sure.
Not like purposely, it just naturally did, just because of the way the team was, whatever. But I think, you know, we had come from making those games, and don't, like, mistake what I'm saying, I loved Burnout, you know, and I poured a lot into it, you know. And I think it's a brilliant game, and I was a small part of like a really big team, but I think that whole team did, and people speak really highly of Burnout, and that means a lot to me. And the same with Joe Danger. I loved those games. I do love those games, and actually being away from them for a little while, I can go back and actually properly enjoy them again now, you know. But I did think, you know, is this what I'm going to be doing? You know what I mean? Like, that's what success looks like, and do I want that, I guess? You know, like, as in forever, and how many more times am I going to do that, and things like that, you know.
It's funny you say that there aren't many old programmers in the industry. Yes, I think there are more and more of us who are, I should say us, people who are staying in the industry for a long time. And I personally, I believe this will be the last job I have.
Right.
Seriously. I mean, I used to, when I started Insomniac, I thought I would only be in the business for a few years, because I just didn't know much about it.
Right.
And then more and more I thought, I can't imagine doing anything else. And you probably hear that from a lot of people, but now I'm 45, and I think, okay, I could probably work another, if I'm lucky enough, I could work another 45 years in this industry, as long as I get to be creative, right? As long as I'm surrounded by people who really love what they do, that's awesome, man. I mean, I'm not trying to be hopelessly optimistic here, but it is really amazing what we get to do on a day in, day out basis. And when I look around at my friends who are not in a creative business, I feel really lucky. I look around at E3, and even though it's a big, over the top, loud event, it's just an expression. It's just amazing how much creative expression there is there, and it's really great. Okay, optimism gone. Let's talk about something really negative and depressing, because too much optimism gets old.
Yeah. Okay, you go first.
No, I don't have anything. Sorry.
That's what I thought. I
Okay.
didn't think.
Yeah.
I don't think you've got it in you.
I like what I do. It's funny. I was thinking about this the other day. I was thinking about just my job. I do a lot of different things at Insomniac, and I no longer have my hands in the games like we used to. And we announced a Ratchet game coming out with the Ratchet movie, just recently. And I was thinking back to the fact that I got to actually build some of the Ratchet game, and then that was one of the last times I got my hands in one of our games doing animation or any kind of art. Yeah. It sucked. It was really bad, but people, because I was in the position I'm in, people let me do it. That was sweet. But regardless, since I get to participate in various aspects of what we do at Insomniac, it's exhilarating. Did
you enjoy going on stage at E3?
Yeah. I mean, it's really fun representing a game kind of, you like.
Be quite charismatic out there, and not that bothered by all the cameras and stuff.
Dude, there was a lot of turmoil inside.
Yeah.
Going out there and knowing that if I screwed up, it was in front of 20 million people. Because that's literally, I mean, it was pretty clear, it was made clear that we were on live TV.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of people watching.
Yeah.
But still, it is fun to have that opportunity to talk about your game. I mean, no question about it. And to show off something you're proud of, and to represent the team, that rocks.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm gonna ham it up out there if I can. And that's not necessarily my nature, but it's kind of like you have to do it. Yeah.
That's a tough. I don't think very many developers could carry it off. It's a good thing to be able to do. It's fun. You made it look fun.
I think we all next E3 we got to start wearing more ridiculous outfits out there.
Right.
I feel like we in this business, we developers do have our uniform, which is the jeans and the untucked shirt, and maybe we need to change it up next time.
What do you think we should be wearing?
I was joking to Brandon, who is the host of our Sunset TV, wears some pretty incredible outfits that I would wear a pink tank top.
Right. Okay.
And I said that knowing that in a million years I would never ever do that. Yeah. Never. But I should. Yeah. Would you do that?
No, that's definitely not me. I'm very boring,
Spacesuit?
I'm afraid. No.
Space helmet? No? Okay. Well, the thing is, you guys are veterans of the industry. I mean, you've certainly been, well, right? I mean, you've been through it.
That's just how I look after E3, you know?
So there's no advice that I could give you that you don't already know. You already have, I mean, you've been through it all. So what's great is that you've chosen to move off in a different direction. And you guys are, at the same time, you guys are taking on, I think, a challenge that most big studios would be really terrified of. Really. I mean, I think that's what
studios.
Well,
anyone with any common sense.
Well, you're going for it, and that's what's awesome, and I think that's what's generated so much excitement about this title for me too. I mean, I cannot wait to play. What I've seen and what I've heard you say just makes me so incredibly excited to play this game and to go out and name my planets after something appropriate.
Right, yeah. We'll know your ones.
Yeah. You guys are professionals, you have a vision for what you're doing, right? And which is the most important part, and you're passionate about it. I can't imagine that anybody needs more ingredients than that to be successful.
Well,
yes,
maybe
money is helpful.
We'll talk in like a year's time when the game's not out and I'm bleeding out of my eyeballs, and I'll be like, Ted, why didn't you warn me?
But we all do that. We all do that, right? I mean, getting to the finish line, getting that last 10% is
so
the
naive.
No, but you know that. It's the most brutal part of game development where everything is great. The game's looking good. We got it to alpha and people are loving it. And okay, now we got to polish it. Holy crap. We've got 2 months left. How are we going to get this game out the door? We all run into that wall. But what gets us through it is when the team rallies and says we believe in it. We're going to make this game work because we know people are going to like it, and it's different.
Yeah.
That's what's so much fun when you can actually put out something that people recognize as different.
Yeah. But then I probably will regret it being an infinite procedural universe during that last 2 months of bug fixing, right?
Yeah, how do you bug fix an infinite procedural universe?
Yeah.
Is that one of those no moments where somebody it's a retroactive no, where somebody says, 4 years ago when I said this would be a great idea, I'm going to maybe retract that.
Yeah. We're going to have a weird process of that, like finishing the game, but it should be fun. It should be different again.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, already we have like a server that runs, and it actually has a bunch of bots, and they go and visit all the planets, and they take like actually animated GIFs, and they post them to this web server we have, and we can just scroll through them and see what the frame rate is and memory and things like that. But we can also just mouse over and just watch animated GIFs, of all these different planets, and we can kind of zoom out and get like 100 by 100 view of like all these animated GIFs and kind of get a view of what's out there in the universe.
You guys should license that. I mean, games are awesome, but you're talking about software that would be really useful for a lot of companies.
Yeah, I don't know. After we make this game and it comes out and it's a total mess, then no one will want to touch our software.
I love your optimism.
Yeah.
I can tell you know it's going to be awesome. Do you have any advice for me? Why not? I mean, come on.
Hardly, no. No, it's just awesome to sit on a sofa with someone whose games I've played and loved, genuinely.
Thanks. Well, we got to have you come by and play some Sunset Overdrive next time you're actually in America.
Yeah.
Or maybe when we're over in Europe, because presumably we'll be over there pretty soon. So
yeah, we might be at a show together or something.
Absolutely.
I'll insist on cutting the queue.
Well, you know what?
Get me to the front
if you let me come play, hell yeah, you come. You can actually demo Sunset for us, and I'll just come play your game wherever you're.
Right. Sounds good.
It.
It's a deal.
All right. Well, we should shake hands like it was official.
Yeah. There we go.
Hey, thanks, man.
Really nice to meet you, man. Really nice.
Cool.
We kind of started without even.
Yeah, I don't. That first part, I hope I'm not getting anybody in trouble by talking about E3 parties I didn't go to or.
About 5 minutes in, I was like, oh well, we're actually doing it.